I always say that the cab is my living room, my confessional, and sometimes my mirror. Anyone who hasn't driven through the wee hours lulled by the sound of the wind whistling in their rearview mirrors doesn't understand the kind of silence the road imposes. I've been a truck driver since I was in my early 20s, and if there's one truth I've learned, it's that we never make the same trip twice, even when the route looks exactly the same on paper. That night I was driving down the highway after carrying a load of empty boxes, light but noisy, each box squeaking inside the trunk with every bump in the asphalt. The clock read 11:17 p.m. when I passed the last toll plaza. The cashier recognized me from the previous weekend and said, "God bless you, boss." I responded with my usual wave and a brief smile. It's funny how small kindnesses become ballast. We keep them. The onboard computer was flashing the reserve light not for fuel but for patience. Signs I've learned to read. I was tired. The body knows when it's time to pull over. But the bill, the invoice, other people's haste demand a few more kilometers. The cabin smelled of stale coffee and cheap deodorant, and I had already retightened the seatbelt 3 times, trying to ward off the drowsiness. I turned on the PX radio to see if there was any life. A man on the 040 was talking about an accident up ahead. Lane partially blocked, attention, attention. I made a mental note. Slow down. Maintain distance. Be alert. Just after a long curve, I saw the flashing lights of a tow truck and the crooked shadow of a small car on the shoulder. 2 cones, a triangle thrown out of line, and a woman in a light-colored blouse talking on her cell phone, walking in a tight circle, as if unsure whether to wait or cry. I pulled over, still learning from my father, who said that a truck stopped out of solidarity never delays a delivery. It just reminds us of who we are. Hazard lights, vest, check the rearview mirror, gate open. "Everything okay there?" I asked, keeping my distance so as not to sound threatening. She hung up mid-sentence and glanced at me from the cap down. She explained quickly. A blown tire, a stuck spare, the tow truck coming soon for 40 minutes. She was afraid of being alone there in the dark. I would be too. I told her I'd shine the truck's headlights while we sorted it out. She nodded. The spare tire indeed seemed welded in place. I used the spray lubricant I keep for emergencies and a piece of pipe as an extension for the wrench. Carefully, without heroism, the bolt gave way. "Thanks, sir," she said, her voice less tense. "I don't even know your name." She doesn't know mine. The road collects these encounters without calling cards. When I returned to the cabin, the clock was already past midnight. The radio was crackling again, complaining about the roadworks at KM 312, and the moonless sky looked like a black tarp stretched over my route. I remembered my daughter, who loves counting the number of red-tailed cars we see when occasionally my wife and she accompany me on a short trip, school vacations, that sort of thing. She invented a name for every sound the truck makes: the sigh of the brake valve, the gigantic roar when I hit a hill loaded down. I miss it so much at those times, but it's a good feeling, one that pushes us forward. The climb up the mountain has always been my favorite part. I can't explain it. Maybe it's the challenge of keeping the revs just right, of feeling my weight obey my foot, of respecting the speed like someone negotiating with the mountain. That night, however, the mountain was different. A low mist obscured the signs, and the reflective strips seemed to draw a narrow corridor just for me. I slowed down. No one can overcome fog by shouting. Up high, near a lookout point that sells pastels and sugarcane juice during the day, there's a police station. I pulled over for the routine check. I had my ID, tachograph, fire extinguisher, and a smile. The inspector asked the usual questions, then pointed to my saint on the dashboard and said his was the same. We laughed. "Be careful, there's an animal on the road ahead." I thanked him. I slowly raised my ox foot and continued on. Further on, I found what he'd warned about: a huge cow crossing slowly, with the disdain of someone who knows she owns the place. 2 cars had stopped. A boy dared to clap. I stopped too. Headlights low, patience high. The cow decided not to argue, walked to the bank and stared at me. I waved my hand as if asking permission from an old lady. The boy shouted, "Thanks for the headlight, brother," and I just gave him a thumbs up. The straight stretch after the mountains is every trucker's temptation. The asphalt beckons, the view opens, the speedometer blinks. But I know the trick. That's when sleep, the most insidious of dangers, returns with a friendly face. I opened the window to let in the cold air and sang to myself an old song my dad used to listen to on the AM radio. The lyrics spoke of a guy who promises to always come home, and the melody, ordinary, had the power to keep me awake. It and the strong scent of orange that had lingered since last week's haul. At kilometer 402, the accident they'd been announcing at the intersection finally appeared. 2 trucks backed up against the median, a car between them, thank God only a crumpled metal sheet. No one seriously injured. At least that's what I understood when I stopped to ask the police officer. Slow down, swerve, breathe. The road is a collection of close calls. We learn to be grateful for every close call. I arrived at the gas station ahead, my body crying out for a shower and my mind begging for silence. While parking, a newbie tried to reverse into the parking space and got stuck. You know when you get a cold sweat because there are 15 pairs of headlights behind you and you feel the weight of judgment? I've been there. I got out and signaled for him to align his wheel with the lane, calmly explaining the horse trailer's breaking point, the so-called cat's eye that only appears when you calm down. In 2 movements, he was in place. From inside the cab, he gave me a wide smile and a "we're together." I made my night. The gas station shower was warm and honest. I stood for a few minutes listening to the water fall like a summer rain, the kind that cleanses the soul. Then at the counter, I ordered my usual French toast and a freshly brewed coffee. The woman brought me a slice of cornmeal cake, because there was some left over and no one here will eat it all. I accepted. On the napkin, I scribbled in the notebook I carry. Such and such day, such and such stretch, I helped someone on the shoulder. I dodged a cow, I taught a maneuver. No fights with anyone, no swear words swallowed. It may not seem like much, but for me, it's a resume. Before I lay down on the short bed in the cab, I sent an audio message to my daughter. "Daughter, today Daddy saw a cloud of milk on the road. It looked like the sky had turned into a farm. And did you know the cow looked at me like a teacher? I'll be home early tomorrow. I love you." I also texted my wife, who responded with a sleep love and a crooked heart emoji that only she uses. I closed the cabin curtains and shut out the world. The truck creaked like ancient wood settling. It's my shelter, my work tool, and ultimately my round-trip ticket to the one I love. The capricious road always tests me, but it's the road that gave me patience, a measure of strength, and a whole repertoire of stories no one would believe if I told them all at once. Tomorrow, when I turn the key and hear the first roar, another journey begins that will be unlike any other. And I'll go again, because that's what I know how to do. Follow the white lines like someone reading a never-ending book, chapter by chapter, with my hands firmly on the steering wheel and my stubborn heart pointed toward home. It was raining like the whole road breathes. Heavy, fine, relentless. I was eastbound on I-12, towing a nearly empty box trailer, and the GPS had Hammond less than 20 miles away. My wipers squeaked in the wrong rhythm, the defroster blew lukewarmly, and the cabin was so quiet you could hear the ping-ping of drops hitting the aluminum roof when I slowed down. The queue at the way station was slow. The headlights of the trucks ahead were yellow blurs, each one releasing the low-lying haze that rain raises from the asphalt. I left the engine brake off so as not to wake anyone, and also because the noise tired me more. I pulled right up to the white line, stepping slowly, and approached the guardhouse. Their windows were fogged up inside, and for a second, I thought no one was there. Then the fog moved. An inspector appeared, very thin with a long neck, and stood there staring straight at me, unblinking in that way that takes your breath away. I can't explain it, but his presence felt cold, as if the cabin had gotten 2 degrees colder just by looking at it. I took my foot off the clutch and let the truck idle on the scale. He pointed to the sign, the wet red stop, and motioned for me to roll down the window. I didn't want to open it too far because of the water, so I only lowered it 2 fingers. He leaned in and whispered as if afraid to let the sound out. "You don't pass on the left side today." The sentence came out clearly, as if someone had spoken into my earpiece. No good evening, no document, that was it. I nodded automatically. I'd seen it all at way stations, a grumpy inspector, a lame joke, even a guy who mistook my dot for the guy behind me. But no one had ever sent me a sentence like that, out of the blue, with that tone. He straightened, his neck looking even longer as he stepped away from the fogged-up window. The cold light from the guardhouse cut across his face for half a second. I paid, took the receipt from the plastic tray, and the light was green. I put the car in gear and slowly pulled away. When it was time to rejoin the highway, I had that silly impulse to do the right thing. Say thank you. I turned on my turn signal to the inner perimeter, circled around behind the guardhouse, and stopped at the same level, next to the window. This time, it was someone else who appeared. A robust woman, her hair tied back, a reflective vest, and a name tag hanging from her shoulder. She had the broad shoulders of someone who carries the night shift. "Do you need anything?" she asked loudly, as if she was used to drivers who couldn't hear well. "I just wanted to thank your colleague," I said. "The guy over there a little while ago. He warned me not to take the left today, a matter of seconds." Her face fell. She took a half step back and I saw my own faded reflection in the wet window. "Colleague," he said softly. "There's been no one else here since 11. Just me." I glanced at the dashboard clock, 11:17 p.m. I felt the skin on my forearms crawl beneath my sweatshirt. I tried to take it in stride. Maybe someone from maintenance. I saw a skinny guy at the window. No maintenance today. No patrols. Just me. She was really pale now. "Are you okay?" I didn't have a good answer. I awkwardly raised my hand, nodded, and continued on. Call it superstition. A work tool we respect is also a hunch. I had a warning in my head. I returned to the right lane as if the left lane were a pothole. The rain picked up a few minutes later, and by some delinquent coincidence, traffic decided to move. A small car tried to pass me on the outside but gave up. I kept going 75, looking far ahead as I've learned to do. 3-4 blocks ahead, searching for different brightness, different shadows. With each gentle curve on I-12, the streetlights repeated like a metronome. When the road cleared, I saw the spot. First, there was a contrast, a darkness that wasn't just rain. The silhouette came next. Jagged branches, a twisted trunk taking up half the left lane, falling inward. The shoulder was littered with leaves and bark, and water ran over it as if someone had tipped over an invisible bucket. If I had forced the pass on the outside at that moment, and I would have had I not had that warning bell in my ear, I would have hit the tree at the wrong angle, with little margin, perhaps just enough time to see the airbag explode. It wasn't one of those thin trees you push with your bumper and keep going. It was an old one, the kind that casts shade all day. Hazard lights on. I slowed down a bit, felt the brakes kick in. I eased into the center slowly and passed. In my rearview mirror, I saw 2 small cars making a last-minute lane change, one almost plunging into the accumulated water. I turned on CB, channel 19, and gave the most direct warning. Tree taking up half a left. 4 miles past Hammond Way Station, heading east. If possible, keep right. I don't know if anyone thanked me. Sometimes the road gives you only silence. I drove for another 5 minutes, half prayer, half technician. My body does what it always does. Signals, monitors, checks the dashboard, but inside you're measuring a different kind of weight. That night's freight was light. What felt heavy was the possibility I hadn't encountered, which remained in the left lane like a large wooden ghost. I stopped at the next rest area when the rain eased. I turned everything off and let only the defroster fan blow. The nighttime hum wafted in with the scent of wet pine and cold diesel. I grabbed the way station receipt from the center console, and then something came up that set me off again. The stamp was crooked, as if someone with a very thin hand had pressed it too quickly. Date, time, everything was correct. But there was a water stain right at the time. A perfect drop, drying like an eye. I stared at that drop that no longer existed for a good few seconds. When we spend too much time on the road, we learn to separate useful fears from useless ones. Useful fear holds your hand. Useless fear holds your foot. The next morning, with light and coffee, I returned the same route to check out of curiosity, a vice of those who want to prove they invented something. The tree was on the shoulder, sawn into 3 pieces, orange cones forming a corridor. A dot truck with yellow lights flashing, 2 men talking and laughing in that sweaty way. I slowed down, rolled down the window, and asked in a raised voice, "Did this happen at dawn?" "It fell at about 11:10, one of them replied, holding the switched-off saw. "Lucky no one tried to make fun of me from the left." I nodded and walked away slowly. I've never liked to force an explanation for something that only requires respect. If you ask me what happened, I'll tell you the simplest way I know how. The guardhouse sometimes talks to people not on the roster. And that night, someone with a long neck and a gaze that pierced through fogged glass decided to talk to me. I heard, and that's why I came. Good evening. My name is Ethan, 38 years old, and I've been a truck driver since I was 19. I'm not known for being easily scared. I've driven through blizzards, sand, and bridges in crosswinds, and I've learned to differentiate paranoia from real warning. I'll tell you what happened that morning as I recorded it in my logbook and my phone's logbook, at least what's left of it. It was a Tuesday, shortly after 2 a.m. I was driving down a nearly deserted interstate, my headlights seeing more fog than asphalt, when I stopped at a rest area I'd never used before. One of those simple ones. A rectangle of concrete, 2 covered tables, trash cans, a cold bathroom with worn tiles. There was only an old motorhome parked sideways, its beige paintwork worn from the sun, and something that made me carefully hit the brake. An upright piano, leaning against the picnic tables. Yes, a piano. In the middle of nowhere. "Who leaves a piano here?" I said aloud, alone, just to hear my own voice. I turned around slowly, looking for a spot. That's when I heard the notes. 3 identical, repeated taps, like a tuning test. Tum, tum, tum. It stopped. Then 3 more. It wasn't a melody, it was someone striking an A, insistent, the dry sound of old string vibrating in the cold air. I assumed it was coming from the RV. Maybe someone joking, maybe some crazy musician. I shrugged. I went to the bathroom. The light flickered with that thin buzz. I used the urinal, washed my face. The water seemed colder than it should have been, and heard, in the distance, the echo of the same tritone, 3 thuds in the air as if the concrete were returning the note. When I returned, the piano was different. The keyboard lid was closed and a tie-down rope was draped over it, cracking the varnish. Someone had secured the lid as a security measure. No one was around. The motorhome remained motionless, curtains drawn. I got into the booth and my screen lit up with 3 text messages from an unknown number. No preview, no history. Don't sleep here. Wind changes at 2:40. Go to Collins. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 2:31. I could have sworn that a minute earlier there had been no signal at all. That stretch had always been a shadow of coverage. I felt irritated. Where had that come from? I checked the area code. Empty, just unknown. I tapped to open the details and the screen froze for a second, like when the network goes down. I took a deep breath. Maybe it was some alert service, but go to Collins sounded personal. Collins. A name I'd seen on signs a few miles earlier. Next town. The idea was to take a 20-minute nap, but the messages had me scratching my head. I started the engine to reposition the truck farther away from the piano in the RV. As I put it in gear, the CB radio hissed on its own without anyone calling. White noise, and from the noise again 3 notes, this time electronic, barely audible. Thud, thud, thud. "Okay," I said. "I get it." I slowly backed out of the parking space and on impulse glanced in the passenger side rearview mirror. The canvas covering the tables was moving in a breeze that didn't even exist. The piano's tie-down rope seemed to vibrate, too taut. I drove away. The road opened up, the lane and shoulder clear, and I passed the first sign that said Collins, 14 MI. The sky, which had been dead, became lively. The low trees on the shoulder began to tilt their crowns to the right, like people taking cover. The crosswind, which had already weighed down the steering wheel, gave a snap. The gust came from the left with a jostling force. I glanced at the dashboard clock involuntarily, reflexively. 2:40. At the same time, in the rearview mirror, I saw the top of a young tree, one of those planted by the Department of Transportation, bend and snap like a toothpick. It fell diagonally, exactly in the rectangle where I would have been if I had parked in the spot near the piano. I slowed down, heart in my throat, and pulled over to the shoulder about 300 meters from the impact. There was no other vehicle in my field of vision. The radio crackled again. 3 sharp clicks, and died. I pressed the emergency button and released it, mostly to keep my hands occupied. The dashboard lights were normal. The engine was running smoothly. I put it back in gear and drove on. When I entered the Collins perimeter, I stopped at the first open gas station. The attendant, a middle-aged woman with a dawn-like look, served coffee like someone who'd seen a lot. I asked if the weather had been bad there. "Wines are brisk," she said. "Turns instantly, knocks down young trees like nothing else." I briefly mentioned the rest area and the piano. She raised her eyebrows. "Piano?" and gave a short, humorless laugh. "You must have stopped at rest 127. The maintenance guys find things strange there. 2 weeks ago they found a tire swing hanging from the pergola that no one admitted to putting up, and what do you call it? Organette? Yeah, on the table. But I've never heard a grand piano." I showed her the text messages. She looked and said, "Those signal towers go down and back up as they please. Delayed alert message, maybe." I shrugged. I wanted to believe it. I returned to the truck with the coffee. Before calling, I opened the conversation on my phone again. The 3 messages were there, the same words, but one detail had changed. The time of receipt showed 2:41, 2:41, and 2:41. 1 minute after the wind. It wasn't like that when I first saw it. I instinctively took a screenshot. When the image saved, the thumbnail showed only a blank screen. I opened it, blank. I wanted to replay it, and then the entire conversation disappeared. Unknown became no sender. I didn't touch it again. I finished the delivery late in the morning. I slept in a company yard as usual. My mind kept wandering back to the piano, as if I'd left a door open. The next day, in the light, I passed the rest area again, this time in the opposite direction. The motorhome was gone. Neither was the piano. Except that where the piano had been, in the concrete, there were 2 thin, parallel caster grooves, extending into the middle of nowhere, and disappearing into the gravel, as if someone had pushed it toward an invisible ledge, and then nothing. The canvas roof had a new mark, a tear that began with 3 small holes in a row, as if something had hit it in 3 places, one after the other. I walked into the bathroom. It smelled of cheap cleaner. On the sink, a crumpled paper towel lay. I was about to throw it in the trash when I noticed a blackened fingerprint, from someone who'd been working with grease. 3 fingers, not 5. It looked like a poorly placed chord, 2 notes and a sustained note. I know this is just nonsense, but my stomach was in knots. I called the transportation department number on the signs. I mentioned the risk, the fallen tree at 2:40. The operator confirmed that the team had received a call almost that same minute and asked for my contact information. Out of curiosity, I asked about the finding of instruments story. The guy laughed. "If you're a musician, Rest 127 is a disaster. We've found a violin without a bow, a broken keyboard, a pyramid-shaped mechanical metronome." He paused. "And always tied down, with a rope, as if someone was afraid they'd play on their own." I didn't laugh. Since then, I treat rest areas with extra stuff like a scene from a movie. I look, record, and move on. Sometimes, in the early morning, the CB makes 3 clicks that no one acknowledges. Sometimes, on the cell phone radio, a single beep comes on at 2:40. I don't sleep in places where the landscape looks staged, and when I see anything tied up, a lid, a piano lid that shouldn't even be there, I take it as a message. Was it a prank? Maybe. Was it wind? I wish it were just wind. But whoever wrote Go to Collins knew exactly where I'd find shelter, and knew the minute the wind would change. And someone, or something, played 3 notes before and after. Today, when the road gets too quiet, and I pass by any place with an object out of place, I hear those 3 thuds in the back of my ear like nails on a wooden board. Thud, thud, thud. It's enough for me to decide, gear engaged,